But we break it down, 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 down. She break it down, 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 down. She got a message for the people, a brilliant mind and a clean soul. She's standing up to the evil and making sure that we all grow strong enough to break these chains we in that keep us in this painful condition. She give us truth and division. That's why we listen. She break it down, 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 down.
Yes. Welcome back. You are listening to Lurie Daniel Favors on Sirius XM's Urban View, where talk empowers and becomes action, and where she do indeed break it down. Now, everything I'm going to share with you all today is a Cliff Notes version of what's going to be in the podcast, because child, the podcast was podcasting today. All right. There's a lot we have to cover, and I only have a little bit of time because we have some amazing guests who are going to be joining us today. Beatrice Beckford from Moms Rising is going to be here in our first hour. We got a lot to cover, but I want to make sure to give y'all the snapshot version and then remind you that at around 2 to 3 o'clock today, we are going to have the podcast episode drop, and there you will get to hear all of this in more detail. Let's talk about some things that's happening internationally. We've been very local in terms of our news coverage over the course of this week, very, very nationally focused. Let's look at what's happening on the international stage. Y'all know, I want to visit one of my favorite countries to talk about, China. China has entered the chat. And you know how in America we have a whole bunch of people who are in the industry where they're focusing on energy, maybe fossil fuels, maybe renewables. But in this country, we seem to have a question that perplexes not just elected leadership, but the people who are like the engineers, the scientists. And that question is like, what are we going to do with solar energy? We don't need solar energy. What do you do when the sun goes down? Because these people act like we are stupid enough to not remember that batteries exist and the capacity to store energy exists. But China is not waylaid by these sorts of foolishness. And that sort of foolishness is what I call it, foolishness, because frankly, this is really the fossil fuels industry's effort to basically get this administration to come away from renewable energy because they make more money when they burn dirty fuel. And we know that this is a big deal because Donald Trump, in his earlier part of this year, he canceled wind farm projects that were like damn near finished. He's pulled back on solar investments, on solar farms that were damn near finished. Now, he lost those cases in court, and the people who were the proprietors of those efforts, those renewable energy efforts, went to court, sued, and they won. Frankly, a whole lot of people been winning that court against Donald Trump. We're going to talk about some more of those cases later on this week, but China's like, we're not doing this American bullshit with y'all. We actually believe in renewable energy, and we believe in it so much that right now, according to Bloomberg, China has undertaken an energy building boom unlike anything else the world has seen. And basically, they added last year 12% more energy than all the power plants combined in India as of the end of 2024. And the energy that they have added since the end of 2021 is larger than the entire American system. They are building more nation-sized power systems every year, and they add more power to their existing system in a year than all the other countries on the planet combined. Now, what's very interesting is that they're not talking about coal. They're not talking about dirty energy. They're talking largely about clean energy. They're taking, quote, an all-out approach to energy sources. Solar energy accounted for more than half of the new additions last year, while installations of wind farms and thermal plants that could burn coal and natural gas were also at records. Yet, because they are getting so much out of their renewable energies, their solar and their wind farms, even though they're adding coal and they're adding nuclear, they're relying on them even less because they have such abundance on other types of energy, which is weird because, again, this is a country that's got engineers way smarter than ours. Like, China's dumbest students in engineering, run circles around American students. That's not shade. That's just facts. And so you've got, not only are their engineers smarter than ours right now because y'all's president forced the DEI to come out of colleges and universities, although we got a Supreme Court decision. Not a Supreme Court decision, rather. We got a judicial opinion on that as well. We're going to, again, talk about that later. But, baby, DEI is back, except for all of y'all colleges and universities that decided to kiss the knee and lick the ass of the emperor who has no clothes. We'll talk about that again later. But what we end up happening is that now even American universities are no longer in the top of anything when it comes to our capacity for science and mathematics. And so the rest of the world is moving on and has moved on. And so when Americans say things like American leaders say things like, well, we can't have wind farms. What do you do when the the wind doesn't blow. We can't do solar. What do you do on a cloudy day? We over here stuck on stupid. We stuck on stupid while the rest of the world is like, let's invest in energy. Let's expand. We can build a whole damn city in a day. Damn year. That's what's happening over there. We talk more about this in the podcast because it's very important for us to know that this is being compared to what's happening here at home. And what we see here at home is, according to Bloomberg, quote, capacity additions have been far slower in the U.S. after power demand appeared to plateau decades ago. Now the country is struggling to meet the needs of power-hungry data sectors following the rapid development of AI, leaving electricity markets very, very tight. And that's a quote from Samantha Dart, who is the co-head of global commodities research at Goldman Sachs. What that means is America was so foolish in its approach to energy that it did not do any investments that were sustained across this administration. And as a result of that, we are now in a situation where we got all these AI data centers that need all this electricity, but we're not building out no more electricity, and we're pulling back on the renewable energy that would be there in the first place. I don't know. It feels a little stuck on stupid to me. Now, what's also been very interesting as it pertains to international conversations is what's happening in the aftermath of the American president kidnapping Nicolas Maduro and bringing him like right here to Brooklyn, where he is still locked up. Him and his wife is in Brooklyn at the Metropolitan Detention Center. Okay, a whole ass president in Brooklyn. Now, but it is Brooklyn. So there's that. But what's interesting about this is one of the things that Donald Trump said right when they went in and kidnapped President Maduro was he said that it was a beautiful thing. This isn't a direct quote. This is like me making fun of him. Me quoting my memory of him, I should say. He basically said it was a beautiful thing. A city of Caracas, lights on, 1.9 million people, and then poof, all of a sudden the lights were off. Now, again, not a direct quote, but that's basically what he was talking about. And we know from video footage of people who were in Caracas at the time, where they were just walking around living their Venezuelan lives, all of a sudden the lights went out. And then you heard the bombs begin dropping, and you saw you heard the explosions happening. And so when he talked about the fact that they had a weapon that allowed them to jam all the systems, that didn't really get a whole lot of attention. But now he's back in the New York Post and he says, I'm not allowed to talk about it. Which means he's going to talk about it, and talk about it he did. There's this weapon that he's been calling the discombobulator, which sounds like some evil villain, sort of like cartoonish characters type of weapon. But the discombobulator is what he's been calling it. And there's been a lot of skepticism as to whether or not the discombobulator actually exists, because they're like, do we really have the ability to turn off all the power? Is that something that like, I don't know about? Now, y'all who are in the military, you probably know all about this, but we're civilians. We don't know. And what we do know is like, this sounds really, really fugazi, because could you do that to New York? Could you turn off all the power in Minnesota? Like, where else might you be using these sorts of weapons and this sort of technology? Now, the way Donald Trump is describing it, he says this so-called discombobulator made Venezuela's military kits, quote unquote, not work. He says they never got their rockets off. They had Russian and Chinese rockets. They never got one off. Now, again, I discussed this way more in depth in the podcast, but what we can tell is that, well, according to David Hambling, who is a weapons expert and a journalist, he says that, quote, as far as I can tell, in that case, he's talking about some kind of electronic warfare system to hone in on air defenses in the country. That might have been something standard or something more exotic, like an electromagnetic pulse or other high power microwave device. Now, what's very interesting about this is that the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Dan Kane has acknowledged that we have this weapon called the EA-18, the EA-18, and it's a Growler electronic warfare aircraft. And basically, he says that that device can, quote, jam the air defense radars that the Venezuelan military might have been relying on to, first of all, detect incoming U.S. aircraft and to use those radars to engage those aircraft, if that was what the Venezuelan military had decided to do. That is a quote from Thomas Withington, who is an associate fellow for military sciences at the UK-based Royal United Service Institute think tank. Now, what's interesting about this is that if we were just talking internationally, it'd be like, spy versus spy type stuff. We might not necessarily be concerned about it the way I think we probably should be. Have you been paying attention to what's been happening in Minneapolis? And I don't mean with the cover-ups of the assassinations of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and don't forget Keith Porter, who was killed on New Year's Eve, say his name. And the fact that his GoFundMe is still not met, that is absolutely ridiculous. I need everybody to go support this brother's GoFundMe. And in fact, let me get the name of it. It's called Support for Keith Porter Jr. Daughter's Future. That man needs to have that GoFundMe completely maxed out. And all you righteous whites who want to say her name for Renee Good and say his name for Alex Preddy, a framework that is completely inappropriate in this context, because the fact that they are white means we are going to know their names, and that framework was created once again, Kimberly Crenshaw, a law professor, brilliant black woman, because of to highlight the fact that black women being assassinated by police were not getting attention. Y'all stop using that phrase. Stop using it. But what we also have to be aware of is that when we're talking about the use of weird weapons that we aren't really sure about internationally, one of the questions I have, and this is the question I explore more readily in the podcast, is how soon before they start using that type of shit here? And I got to ask that question because we now know that according to a number of reports, ICE is using what's called an LRAD weapon at close range against peaceful protesters. Now, LRAD stands for Long Range Acoustic Device. This is a device, we've seen it on the ground. We saw it in other places where black people was protesting for Black Lives Matter, but a whole lot of y'all didn't agree with that phrase. So now it's in white ass Minneapolis. And what we now know is that when you are exposed to an LRAD device, which is again a long range acoustic device, you are going to experience a whole host of things like permanent hearing loss, tinnitus, which is a constant ringing in the ears, ruptured eardrums, vertigo and balance problems, migraines and nausea, panic responses. Again, this is not a new device, but it's very interesting to me that just a month, not even a full month after they done used some weird ass shit to get President Nicolas Maduro out of his country and bring his ass to Brooklyn, they're using very interesting weapons of war against Americans right here in these United States. Now, what's good about this, and frankly, there's nothing good about this, but one of the things I do discuss in the podcast episode more in depth is the fact that we now have local prosecutors who are operating Project FAFO. As in fuck around and find out. But that's not what it stands for. It stands for the Project for Fighting Against Federal Overreach. So FAFO, but the clean version. But FAFO, this project is basically local law enforcement, local prosecutors who are seeking to create a framework that would allow them to actually be able to prosecute ICE. This is very, very important because we now have reports of the ways in which Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller and Kash Patel, they basically are in a whole conspiratorial situation where they are trying to block the investigations. And they have done so pretty effectively right now. So having local prosecutors from a variety of major states across the country who are collaborating on this, extraordinarily important. Let's talk a little bit about Kristi Noem and what's happening here because she is in trouble. Kristi Noem, who is a puppy-killing beast of a woman, she is in a lot of trouble because it looks like they're trying to get her out, but she's like, well, if I'm going down, I'm taking Stephen with me. You know how they said that Alex Peretti was trying to massacre the agents? Apparently, Stephen Miller, who is the architect of a whole lot of the devilment that we're seeing right now, he dictated that to Kristi Noem. Like those were his words, that was his frame, and he and everybody else was using it. And so now Alex Peretti's family is like, we might be suing y'all for defamation, and I pray to God that they do. But we're also now realizing that their infighting within the Oval Office is really, it's coming to bear. Because what we also now know from CNN is that them agents, they knew who Alex Peretti was. Alex Peretti, a week before, and again, I discuss this way more in depth in the podcast. Alex Peretti, a week before he was assassinated, he was witnessing a family running from ICE. He gets out of the car. He begins blowing his whistle. He was tackled by ICE agents at that time. 5 of them tackled him so much so that they busted a rib. He broke his rib. This is a week before. A week before he was back out there trying to defend other people from what ICE was doing. And so we now know that ICE has been gathering information about the protesters and the agitators and the community responders. They've been gathering names, they've been gathering intel, they've been gathering data, and they've been keeping it in a database. And we have now reason to believe, multiple sources are reporting that they knew who Alex Peretti was from before, which begs the question, did y'all target him? Because you didn't see a weapon when he didn't brandish a weapon. He was literally helping a woman who had been pushed to get up and protect her from the pepper spray. But it looks as though, according to CNN and a number of other outlets, they knew exactly who that man was when they did to him what they did to him. And now we have a lot more information about the database that they have been gathering on Americans. You remember the database, and remember we talked about this yesterday? Actually, I think I talked about this on my live yesterday, not on the show yesterday, because y'all, was it yesterday I was out? My God, time is a flat circle. What's today? Wednesday? Yes, yesterday I was out. So I talked about the fact that, remember when Donald Trump put out that national security memo? And the national security memo was basically a memo that was designed to say that we're going to get, if you're anti-American, if you're anti-capitalist, if you're anti-Christian, and they mean Christian nationalists, they don't mean like the Jesus Christianity. If you're anti those things, if you're pro gender ideology, if you're pro any of the things that people on the left, people who tend to be more progressive, people who want like equity and justice tend to be for, that you would now be considered a domestic terrorist. Remember we talked about this extensively in Donald Trump, when Donald Trump put out that national security memo, NSPM 7, I believe it was called. Well, they're doing it. They're collecting names. They're collecting the information. And we now know that ICE locally was very clear about who Alex Peretti was, which means we got to be real clear about how we organize and how we figure out what happens next. Also want to just say shout out to Ilhan Omar. We got to get ready to go. I see our guests is in the chat in the Zoom. We got to get ready to go. I just want to say shout out to Ilhan Omar, and to those of you who think that the little blacks don't have hands. Ilhan Omar was doing a press event yesterday. She was actually, I think it was a town hall, and you can see in the video footage, which I don't have the capacity to play right now because we got way too much other things to get to, but you can see in the video footage this white man stand up and approach her, and he squeezes something at her out of a syringe. You see a liquid fly out of it. You see her look at him, look down, and then you see her do this. And y'all of you who are in Urban View, y'all can't see me. She pulled that fist back. She got them hands, and she lunges to go get him. The only reason she didn't get to him first was because her security team did. I'm just going to say, stop fucking around with black people. We minding our black ass business. Now, I know some of y'all is upset because y'all like to say that Ilhan's not really black American, and I don't know that she identifies as a black American, but she's a part of the Pan-African diaspora, which to me makes her black people. Y'all be acting like we can't defend ourselves. Ilhan Omar survived war. She lived in a refugee camp. You could tell by the way she took that stance, you could tell she done had to throw some hands before. So lots more that I could say about all of these topics. I don't have time to say anything about more of these topics because we have our amazing guest, Beatrice Beckford, who's going to be joining us. And for you on YouTube, again, and for those of you who are part of Urban View, if you want to hear more about this again today, later on this afternoon, we are going to have the podcast out, and I go into all of this way more in depth with a whole lot more sites and sources and information. Be ready. Stay ready. These people are tracking who you are. They are trying to block the ability to be held accountable, and they're doing so with the same sort of approach to weaponry that they use to kidnap presidents of other nations. Are we great yet? Are y'all great yet? Y'all not looking great. Y'all looking like